Hello there. This is John Bishop, and I'm here with my very good friend, Dr. Nancy Flournoy. And whoever's watching this tonight, we welcome you, and we're very excited to have another one of Nancy's wonderful webinars. Tonight, she's going to be talking about the Lifewave Carnosine patch, and this is a very patch that I use all the time. It really has an amazing background behind it and how it was created. I was invented by David Schmidt, the inventor and CEO. So Nancy's going to give a really good presentation tonight. So everybody, I'd like to turn it over now to Nancy. And Nancy, maybe give a little background of yourself, and then we can start the presentation.
Thank you, John. I'll bring up the screen while I'm talking. And I'm very delighted to have all of those who are listening here in person, and those who are, okay, now it did this funny thing again. Do you see the screen the way you should?
Yeah, it's got everything kind of split up with...
Yeah, okay, so it did that again. Hang on.
Okay.
Here it just seems to be confused because I have two screens, and so there I just unplugged one, and we will try it again.
Okay. There we go. That's better.
Now I will do this. Now you see.
Yes, perfect.
Yes, so I'm Dr. Nancy Flournoy. I got my PhD in biomathematics. I spent my career doing inventing statistical methods for novel clinical trials and new methodologies. And so I've been involved with medicine and the associated research for a long time. But came into Lifewave, came to know Lifewave, and was so impressed with it. I really wanted to learn about the science surrounding the patches. And so I've started this series of talks about the research. And if you're interested, they're on my YouTube channel, starting with an overview. And we are now talking about carnosine, which is one of what they call the Y-age, as in Y-age patches. And so what I'm going to do is talk a bit about the molecule carnosine and what it does in your body. So this is like why you should care. A little bit about how the patch operates. I'll start off with that just a little bit because there's a lot more of that in the overview talk. And then we'll talk about what research has actually been done on the Lifewave patches particularly. So I will start out by saying that all of Lifewave is the company. I should have had that on the first slide, but Lifewave has these phototherapy patches, and they're patented. They're passive, wireless nanotechnology, and they have little nano antenna. So I'll say a bit more about that. But first, be aware that when one uses these phototherapy patches, you get no drugs, no chemicals, no stimulants. So it's strictly light that's coming into your body. So here, here is my slide about, in general, how they work. Here, over here on the right, we have the founder, David Schmidt, who invented these patches. On the left, you have a little picture of the patch showing that it's less than 4 centimeters across. So it's like a little Band-Aid. You slap it in different places of your body, which there's instructions. And on the patch is a crystal. And the crystal, so when the heat of your body you get the heat energy, the light from your body comes and hits that crystal, and the crystal is composed in a certain way that it's only going to reflect certain wavelengths back into your body. And that's what's being demonstrated in this second little figure, is the light, the light coming in and then only certain wavelengths coming out. So what David has done is figure out how to make those crystals to put out just a specific signal that will increase specific products. It will tell your body to make more of certain products. And the little molecule that I've drawn down here is, in fact, the carnosine molecule. And just while we're here, take a look at this little ring that hangs off the bottom. This we're going to say a bit more about specifically. So this is another little picture, a sketch of the same molecule, and you see this little ring hanging off. Now, just the basic chemistry lesson, when you see, we're basically made up of these strings of carbons with things hanging off of them. So when you see a line drawn like this, at every bend point, there's one or more carbons there, and there's so many carbons they don't bother to put them in, they just put what else is hanging off of them. And so we have oxygens and hydrogens and nitrogens in the case of this carnosine patch. So it's a very small molecule. It's called a dipeptide, and it just has two amino acids called belanine and histidine. And it was first isolated from meat extracts in 1900. So it's now known that carnosine is to be found widely over your whole body. And in particular, it concentrates in the brain, the cardiac muscle, the stomach, the kidney, the olfactory bulbs, and in the skeletal muscle. So oops, I went the wrong way. So one of the things, you can buy carnosine supplements, but if you take carnosine supplements, it's not going to be absorbed as carnosine. It gets destroyed in the bloodstream by particular enzymes, and so it has to be rebuilt once. So even if you took the component parts, it has to be rebuilt once you get those parts into your body. And there's enzymes running around that are perfectly happy to split that carnosine back into its two amino acids. So again, it's a tiny molecule. So one of the things that makes it special is that it's a small enough that it can cross the blood-brain barrier. And we'll be thinking of that when we talk about some of the things that it's going to do. So here, now let's just talk about this ring for a minute. Here's a little, just pulling this little ring out to look at. This ring occurs in other molecules as well. And if you look at this list, they have this ring in whatever molecule that you find it in. It has this huge, long laundry list of good things that it's going to do for you. There are, on the left here, we have some things that it will catalyze and your antibacterial, anti-cancer, vasodilation, and vasoconstriction. So it's going to make your blood vessel big. It's going to make your blood vessel small. And presumably it has the brains to know when it's supposed to do what. And then you have this long list of pharmacological actions that it just looks, it's so long that you have to stop and say, well, what's really basic behind this list that's going to have such wide-ranging effects. And it's got to be something, because to tie all this together. So the ring over here on the left, if we look at a deeper level, it's known for, it's been shown to be responsible for 4 things. And we'll look at each of these individually. So I'll just read them now so that you know what's coming. It's responsible for something called protein buffering. It's anti-glycating. It does metal ion cleating, and it has antioxidant properties. So just a couple of definitions then. We're going to talk about the buffering first. And so buffer buffers are substances that maintain the pH in your body. And when it gets away from its optimal value, it brings it back to the optimal value. I'm going to talk more about this on the next few slides. And the chemical part of that is that it maintains balance by taking away or adding hydrogen ions. So we'll talk more about this. It goes by other names. It can be called a buffer. It can be called a pH buffer. It can be called a hydrogen ion buffer or a buffer solution. And then just as a definition, the chelating agent is a molecule that's capable of binding metal ions. So that is going to be useful for detox. So let's talk about carnosine as a protein buffer. So when you're really working and you get you've been consuming a lot of oxygen to support your energy demand, but you're pretty much running out of how much oxygen you can. You've used more energy than what you could consume. Then your body starts breaking down glucose. And this breakdown of glucose produces lactate, which most runners know, and anybody that's listened to the running community. But in that action, it produces a lot of hydrogen atoms. So with all these hydrogen atoms make the pH of the muscle too low, lower than it should be normally. And what this does is make the muscle so it can't contract anymore. So that, if you're a runner, that really inhibits you. If you're talking about this happening in your heart, well, it's not so good either. So this slide is to sort of discuss, we're going to just spend a little bit of time talking about the relationship between the accumulation of hydrogen ions, the pH, and what this means to how your muscles function. So far we've made the point that you want to maintain your pH balance, and that if you get too many hydrogen atoms, your muscles can no longer contract. And this last little box says that this excess accumulation of hydrogen atoms can be buffered, that is brought back to normal, by carnosine. Another bicarbonate also will help for if the imbalance is outside the cells. Carnosine helps if the imbalance is inside the cells. So if you bring more carnosine and bicarbonate into the system, you're going to be more resistant to fatigue, and you're going to be able to perform better. And that is speaking in kind of the sports language. And for us mere mortals, it means we're going to feel better and not tire as easily and be able to get through our days the way we would like to. So this relationship between carnosine and the ability to perform has been known in the bodybuilding community and the sports community for a long time. So let's just remind ourselves what pH is. So if you've had a swimming pool ever, or been around anybody that has a swimming pool, you know that if you don't maintain a certain pH, that the swimming pool is going to get completely clogged up with algae and be quite a mess. And if it's too acidic, then it's going to burn your eyes and you can't swim. So we all have a sense of what pH is. On the left, we have this little scale that goes from 14 to 1, and 7 is neutral. And the lower values are acid and the higher values are base. And normal for the body is just above 7. I think it's 7.4. is about normal for the body. So a little more base than acid. And so if you look at the table on the right, you get some ideas of what common items have these different pH levels. So very acidic is your sodium hydroxide and your household bleach. I'm going the other way around. These are very basic. You come on down closer to 7 and you have eggs and then blood and then, well, pure water. This is actually, you'll see that if it's that some of the treated water can be pretty far off the 7 value, but most city waters and those that are maintained by water companies are maintained to be around 7. You get down here towards acidic, and you have your soda pop, your vinegar, your lemon juice, and hydrochloric acid down here at the end. So there are long lists of food you can find on the web that will give you more precise if you're interested in a particular food. But let's just look at this. This is another, this slide now takes that comment about the pH scale and relates it to these hydrogen ions that are floating around. So here we have a concentration of ions, 10 to the minus 1 in the acidic region, up to like 10 to the minus 12 over here in the basic region. So those are seem small concentrations, but nevertheless, as the pH goes up, the hydrogen concentrations go down. They have an inverse relationship. And so by adding ions, you can make the solution more acidic. So increase the hydrogen up here, more acidic. Now this says increase hydrogen on hydroxide. Okay, so decrease the hydrogen, you go more basic. So 1-to-1 relationship. If we talk about changing the pH, we can talk about changing the hydrogen. We're talking about the same thing. That's the point. And then here's just a little scheme to put some foods on the scale. And you see that over here in the acidic, you have your wine and your beer and your hamburgers and your fast food and your Cokes and basically our junk food. You have some special waters here on the left and some special waters on the right, and then sort of your normal water and tea in the middle. And then you have your fruits and vegetables on the basic line. So it's a fact that our bodies, particularly in our Western diet, tend to be too acidic. And that if you maintain your body with too much acid, the bacteria and illnesses and diseases are going to thrive. So it's one thing to say you want balance. It's another thing to say in our culture, you want to pay more attention to getting more basic food items in your diet. Now, if you're too acidic, what's your body do? It starts borrowing minerals from your organs, your bones, and your tissue, and to try and neutralize the acid and remove it from your body. So if you've got too much acid in your body, your body just starts sort of cannibalizing itself to try and come back to this normal pH. And so the body becomes overall weak, and you're going to get yeast and fungus and chronic fatigue. And you can see now a long list of things that you can begin to see why, if you have a molecules such as carnosine that's going to help maintain your pH, it is going to also be helping prevent or mitigate a whole lot of diseases that are dependent on having a nice normal pH. So your fruits and vegetables are mostly alkaline forming. This is one, when we've all heard, avoid your processed foods and sugars, and for many people, you're told not to drink coffee or alcohol, and certainly tobacco. And there are many reasons that are given for not eating these items, but one of them is that they make you too acidic, that make you susceptible to a lot of bad things happening to you. So I'll just mention down here at the bottom, one thing, this is the debate of should you have meat, should you be a vegan? And there are, in terms of the pH, if you measure the pH of meat before you eat it, it's alkaline. But once you digest it in your body, it actually, the components that are left over are acidic. So as far as you're concerned about how it affects the pH in your body, meat is very acid forming. So we started this discussion out with the idea that carnosine is going to help maintain your pH, which this slide on the left is telling you that your biological systems in general depend on having just the right amount of hydrogen atoms, just the right pH level. And one place where buffering occurs, that is where there is a particular reaction trying to equalize your pH levels, is with lactate molecules, and they are particularly act to buffer the acid in the blood. So it's not so you get the lactate from a lot of exercise, and it's not the lactate that makes the blood acidic. It's the fact that you don't have enough oxygen to make your energy molecules, the ATP molecules. You don't have enough energy to actually use those. And so when the process the body has to go through to make that energy usable when it doesn't have oxygen is what forms the acidic environment. Now, back to muscles in general. The body's going to break down glucose. That process is called glycolysis. And it is, in fact, the primary energy you use when you exercise. So when you work more intensely, you get equal amounts of lactate, and hydrogen atoms become the major end product of the metabolism. And these hydrogen atoms get transported into the muscle cells and into your circulatory system. But as you exercise more, the rate at which you produce the hydrogen atoms becomes insufficient. And therefore, your pH falls in the muscles, and this process is called acidification. The acidity rises, the pH falls, and fatigue sets in. Now, one of the ways that one of the things that happens that makes the fatigue set in is you get what's called cross-links between the proteins. So you have proteins that are responsible for generating power, and all of a sudden they start getting these little they start getting tied together, and when they're not supposed to be tied together. And then the muscle fibers get short and they don't work so well. So carnosine buffers help the muscle continue to work. Now, what's a really important muscle in our body? Well, it's the heart. And so the same mechanism of carnosine working to maintain our pH also helps with our heart function a lot. So the heart contracts and releases. That's the heartbeat. And the failure of it to do so is a major cause of morbidity and mortality in patients with heart disease, or if they have something like sepsis. Now, it turns out that this failure to contract is associated with calcium in a particular cell in the well, myocyte is what they call is a muscle cell, a small muscle cell. So it's a muscle, it's just a particular type of muscle. So we're going to relate this need for calcium back to carnosine. So in the heart, you need to have particular calcium levels. And what this calcium does is what the muscles need the calcium for is so they'll contract and squeeze the blood out of the heart and into the arteries. Well, sounds pretty basic. We certainly want that to happen. When scientists were looking for reasons, for mechanisms to explain what calcium had to do with the heart pumping its blood, I think I got the name of the author of this particular finding down here, Zaloga and his colleagues in 1996. They found new roles for carnosine to regulate, and the role, what they found it did is that it regulates the calcium in the cells, and therefore it regulates the contraction or the ability of the heart cells to contract. So they did studies in rats, found out that if you had more carnosine, then you had more free calcium that would then help the heart to work right. And their last statement here is that they believe that carnosine represents an intercellular message system for the regulation and modulation of intercellular calcium. Now, I mean, that's a little different, that it's saying it's a messenger system rather than just being part of the chemical reaction. So it took a little bit of digging to connect the dots on this. So this blue thing is myosin. That's the heart cell. And we have this other molecule up here called actin. And then we've got these little like levers that are going to connect between the heart cell and the actin and then release. So here they're separate, and here this lever system goes up and grabs onto the actin. Something happens. The contraction is this angle changes, it bends in, and then it releases and goes back to the starting point. So this is intended to be a picture of the heart muscle contracting and letting go. So when a signal for the muscle contraction is sent along a nerve to a muscle cell, the actin and myosin are activated. The myosin works as a motor, and it causes the ATP to release its energy in such a way that the filament moves. See here, the filament's where it is, and all of a sudden it's shifted off to the right. And so it causes these two things to pass each other, which makes this connection between go at a different angle. And there, that is your muscle contracting, or a little picture of your muscle contracting. So what happens if you don't have calcium? this myosin motor is blocked and doesn't work. So this is a little insight as to why we needed the calcium to make our muscle contract. And it is the carnosine that's regulating the calcium. So we also have carnosine buffering in the gut. And in the gut, it acts as an, well, what they know about it for the most part is its antibacterial function. So in particular, this little creature here, which you don't want to get, it's a nasty one, but carnosine will help get rid of it. Now, anti-glycating agent. So what's glycation? If you have a sugar and you have a protein or a lipid, and they each should be doing their own thing, the sugar should be making energy, the protein is going to be like your muscle, or the lipid is going to be, you know, some of the fat right under your skin or elsewhere. The glycation is these things get stuck together and when they're not supposed to be. And so now you have a muscle that isn't doing anything good for anybody. And the typical sugars that get involved in this process are glucose, fructose, and their derivatives. So if you don't have good blood sugar control, then people that don't have good blood sugar control suffer more from these reactions and have, you know, more of their sugars brought up with their proteins, and neither one can function properly. So we want to be anti that, and we want to get the sugar released from the protein to return the cell to its normal state and function. And just as an aside, so in one thing, this process of glycation is responsible for the development of cataracts because of what it's doing to the lenses in the eye. Carnosine, not just here we're just talking about it linking to sugars and proteins, but it also can link but DNA and DNA can get caught up with protein, and carnosine will help prevent that as well. Now, as a cleating agent, what is a cleating agent? It's a chemical compound that coordinates with a metal, and it traps heavy metal ions, and then you can dispose of them. And carnosine in particular protects against copper and zinc induced neurotoxicity. So one thing we find as we read the literature on carnosine, where it may sound like, okay, it's an antioxidant, it sounds like maybe it's doing the same thing as other antioxidants that you know about, but we'll find that it is more related to problems. It's more related to protecting us from problems that are neurological in our nervous system than others, which may be operating in the blood or the lymphs or, you know, somewhere else. So carnosine's been successfully used to treat patients after stroke. It has been used to augment drugs that are used for Parkinson's disease. So there are a number of studies with carnosine being used to help with nervous related problems. Now, I think we're getting to the end of the carnosine as a buffer. So back to it being as an antioxidant. So we've talked before about free radicals. And the language gets a little bit different when we talk about carnosine. It effectively scavenges what is called reactive oxygen and reactive nitrogen molecules and aldehydes. So these are pretty nasty. We've talked about oxidative stress and the reactive oxygen and the reactive nitrogen molecules are like extremely bad with respect to oxidative stress. And this is where carnosine comes in to be very helpful. So carnosine in particular, it's so small that it can go right into the nucleus of your cell and work on a genetic level. And I don't know if any of the other antioxidants can do that. So once it's inside the nucleus of a cell, it actually binds to the genetic code and tells your body to stop producing more antioxidants. And so not only does it work as an antioxidant itself to combat the really bad free radicals, but it increases your production of antioxidants. So this is really pretty super. And this, just to say a little more about carnosine as an antioxidant, the picture, this is one of my favorite pictures to explain this, but it only kind of tells half the story. So in this picture, we have our free radical, we have our negative ions here that are that are paired, and two negatives make a positive. So if we're missing one, you have this live wire, this free radical that is just really whipping around like a live wire, looking for something to pair to. And your antioxidant come down here and hand it a negative ion, and everything's good. Well, our carnosine, remember, is largely putting out positive ions, the hydrogen, which is positive, not the negative ones here. So it turns out that the negative ions can be capped by a positive ion and neutralized that way too. And in both cases, do they talk about them being antioxidants. So, so there you go. And there's lots of problems with that get resolved from this activity that carnosine has. And it is implicated in helping reduce or prevent macular degeneration, and also preventing glaucoma. And then, as I think the one that pays the bill for all the scientists is to show that it helps with your wrinkles, and that will be the case as well. So, so everything that we just talked about had to do with this imidazole ring, that little piece of the carnosine molecule. And that was a lot of stuff. But carnosine does a few more things too. There's this word here that's a lot like, we'll talk about it here, right here, I have to find it. So glycation, which is what we talked about before, and glycosylation are both mechanisms for adding carbohydrates to proteins. And I won't say any more about that, but it's two different ways to do that. So carnosine is good, and so so carnosine is going to block this. It's going to block peroxidation and the cross-linking of proteins. And we've talked a little bit about cross-linking and why you might not want to do it. So this glycosylation, as opposed to the glycation just produces an abnormal molecule. Glycosylation produces a functional molecule that's going to do something to you, but in the process, it has a lot of bad end products that have to be gotten rid of. And so it's the end products of that relation, that reaction, that are going to damage your collagen and at the very minimum, produce wrinkling features in your skin. So, so you don't want that. Now we have this new term, peroxidation, as opposed to oxidation here. So what's the difference? So with oxygen, you combine something with oxygen, and you get a reaction in which the element you started with loses electrons, and so you have a higher oxidation state. Oxidation as in your banana turned black. Paradoxin is any reaction that produces peroxide, and you can think of hydrogen peroxide, and so it's a more extreme oxidation. So hydrogen peroxide is the simplest peroxide that can be found. And I think that's all we need to say about that. It can happen with lipids. So we have lipid peroxidation. And with lipid peroxidation, we get a self-propagating chain of reactions that start to degrade your fats, your lipids, the lipids you want. So you don't want that. They just start tearing down your, the little fat layer under your skin or wherever it is they are. And in this process, the free radicals start stealing electrons from the lipids, and the lipids needed their electrons, so that wasn't good. And then here's the long list of terrible things that can happen if you have a rampant case of lipid peroxidation. Not good. So we're getting close to the end here. Carnosine is also found to help with inflammation and wound healing. And this is primarily then attributed to its component parts, the beta-alanine that made it, which is known for helping. And in the case of wounds, it increases granulation, which helps your body to create a framework on which to rebuild tissue. Lastly, and we will just spend a minute on this, carnosine, as said at the beginning, was known as a longevity molecule, and that's because it reduces telomere damage. So what are telomeres? Well, here's your DNA strands up here. They've got these little, look like fingernails on the end. They're called telomeres. And you start out with one cell, and it divides into two, and then it divides again, divides again, divides again. And each time the cell divides, you see there's a little bit of this telomere gets lost. And so by the time you have gone out 40 to 60 times in culture, you're out of telomere, and the whole culture is going to die. It'll go into what it calls a senescence phase. So that process from the time we're born and you have cells that start dividing in humans, that process translates to about 120 years of human lifespan. So the carnosine reduces the damage to the telomeres and reduces its shortening rate. And therefore, you should live longer if you have your carnosine. So just spend a few minutes now on what is known about the research into the carnosine Lifewave patches, which are really quite remarkable. This is a study by Blake Greenberg and Nazrin. Nazrin was an engineer in Texas, I believe, El Paso, and Blake Greenberg, it was a wellness practitioner who happens to own the equipment that does these studies and actually did the clinical work. And the two of them together came up with this really nice system, which David, the CEO of Lifewave, has used to study a number of different patches. And they're actually studying the electrical conductivity rate through the skin. And so what we have here on the left is a list of organs which improved with the use of patches after just 12 hours per day for 2 weeks. So this list of organs had significantly better electrical energy flow through them and around them, and these three did not, which doesn't mean that if you hadn't gone on for 3 weeks that they would be significant too. But in the study we have, at least a bunch of very important organs got significant improvement. And here's another study done by Lisa Tully, and this is all, more sports oriented in terms of what she was measuring, but in statistical jargon, less than 0.05 is sort of the cutoff to look at. And if it's less than that, then you had a difference pre-test and pro-test. And so for all these strength measurements, there's only, there's a couple here that didn't quite make the 0.05 level. So, I mean, that's just, most of them did. It's pretty remarkable. Now, because carnosine can cross the blood-brain barrier and then potentially is doing detox and cleaning things up and helping with the function of your brain, it was reasonable to question whether it's going to help with your mental processes. And these two scientists, the Bukowskis, Helen and Tom, I believe it is, and their colleague Tang. Helen is a psychologist, and Tom was in the engineering department, bioengineering, I believe, department at the University of Washington. So they made quite a team, and I'm sure Helen was responsible for the mental testing part of their research, and they had a long battery of tests that was quite extensive, and so this was psychological testing, and then physical testing. They looked at the heart rhythm to get a measure of whether sympathetic or parasympathetic activity was being improved. And so you don't have to look at this whole thing, but you look down here on the left, we have the cognitive and memory and a number of the mental processing summary measures. These are lots of tests and questions under each one of these. And then on the right, so they tested on pre-treatment and control, they tested on post-treatment and control. So this is the difference, this is the difference between the treatment pre and post, and this is the difference between the control pre and post. And if you just scan down it, the treatment side is much bigger than the control side everywhere. And from a statistical point of view, these two did not make statistical significance. The spatial processing and the reaction time and everything else did quite nicely. So this, and I don't know why this didn't end up on their little flyer. I think sometimes David mentions it. Great result. So, summary of the carnosine research. It improves the function of the pancreas, right kidney, left and right adrenals, hypothalamus, pituitary and thyroid glands, improves flexibility, strength and endurance, increases sympathetic activity of the autonomic nervous system. I didn't show you the details on that. Improves cognition. And so that's what Lifewave itself was able to establish. And from everything we just talked about with respect to what carnosine itself does, we really have, it's really reasonable to expect that it's going to do much more for you. Lifewave is these are not medical devices. So if you are sick, you need to talk to your doctor. With Lifewave, make no claim to treat a disease or cure an illness. There's a list of the research sponsored by Lifewave, a few other references. You can come back to this again on your own once it gets posted. And here is the collection of Lifewave patches that we're so fortunate to have available to us. And I look forward to seeing you for my next talk on the Eon YH patch. Let's see, I don't know, is this the first Friday of next month? I believe this is the end, yes, first Friday of next month. So thank you all, and I will stop sharing my screen. Hello, Peter.
Nice, Nancy. Very nice.
Thank you.
I'm John. I'm not Peter.
You're John. I don't know where I got Peter.
I got the carnosine on my hand right now.
Do you?
Yeah, and I was doing some kettlebell swings, and I didn't notice it right away, but a couple hours later, I was just like I couldn't grab anything or pick up anything. So I
You know what it was, John? You hit yourself in the head by going.
Yeah, right. Well, I put the ice wave on there too with the carnosine and the neon. So before I could only go like this, and now I can go like this without any pain. So,
Yeah, I know. Now you're a concert pianist. I get it.
My mom was.
I know.
I was going to say that.
That was about an hour. That was about an hour from the time I put it on there. But it was like hurting me for a couple of days. And yeah, it's just like, wow, feels
what's on there.
Still a little painful, but it's a way better than it was. If I squeeze really tight, I can feel it really deep in there. But it's like I literally couldn't pick up my sake cup. And that's a problem.
So testimony.
There you go.
5 weeks from having knee replacement.
Yes.
Along the scar X39, usually 2 or 3 of them. I leave them a little longer than most people do. But the swelling is all up by the vastus lateralis and the IT band, which is common. And I had a lot of scar tissue above the kneecap because I had a lot of floating garbage that they had to take out. This is what happens to ballet dancers over a period of time. But I put the ion patch there, and it's there right now. I have an X39 there right now. But yeah, I use it all the time. I like it. Of all the YH products, I tend to like the ion patch better. But the carnosine patch I always wear. I put it on my heart today.
Yeah,
which is not recommended, but yeah, as you were talking about it, it's a pretty darn good place to put it, Nance. So I am 8 weeks early for average recovery from knee replacement surgery. Now, I can attest that to both John and I. We recovered from injuries easier because we were athletes. Athletes, even old in your 60s and 70s athletes, as long as you've done a little bit, I mean, we're both educators in dance now still. As long as you do a little bit and you still maintain it some, you're going to recover faster. But I'm a wee bit ahead of the game.
8 weeks is
So,
great. Congratulations.
That is great.
Thank you. Thank you. And the one thing that happened though is they put you on all these opioids for pain. I hated them. They gave me such GI tract problems. I got off of them. I'd rather have the pain and deal with it. And then when I can take NSAIDs again, take them. And use the ice wave patch, which worked some, but it's a lot of pain. But we have a high tolerance for pain anyway. But the one thing I did was I just stuck glutathione below my navel, along with trying to take the laxatives and the other things that help. And it's taken a while, but it's finally working. That was a big deal. The one thing that I tried, which you said, John, with I know I'm going all over the place. I'm not sticking to carnosine. I apologize, Nancy.
That's okay.
But I put the energy enhancer patches on L3, in between my two toe, big and second toe. They don't work for me as much as they do most people in keeping energy going for me. So, but that said, that I talked with the doctor and she said doesn't matter what kind of athlete you were or whatever. This is the most invasive surgery there is, besides having to amputate a leg.
Wow.
More than a hip, more than an ankle, more than a shoulder. Wow. There's 6 pieces of chromium cobalt that they put into your knee. And your body, number one, wants to fight that. And number 2, the tissue has to regrow around it. Number 3, the nerves have to. So there's a lot of fatigue involved. And you wonder why because I don't have that much pain anymore or anything, but the fatigue is there. So the patches, I think, have helped with it some. I don't have the immediate reaction like most people. But the ion patch, the carnosine patch, X39 and X49, they do work for me. Okay. I wish they get rid of my gray hair and grow more hair in, but I know you've talked about that already. And other patches.
Well,
So,
for those of us that have had serious medical issues, the idea of whether we have a few wrinkles or whether we have gray hair is pretty low end.
Yeah. My mother turned 97 on Monday, and I was supposed to take her out, to pick her up the assisted living and take her to a nice little restaurant here. And I drove all the way over there, which is about an hour from here. She said, Philip, I just don't have enough energy to do it. And she doesn't use the patches. I tried, but nevertheless, but at 97, God bless her.
Right. Right.
Let her have her way. Yeah,
Right.
I'll take her next week. I'm taking her to get her hair done. So, as a caregiver, you have to she's 97, thereby grace go I. So, and she got there without the patches. That's amazing. So,
I was going to say, you were talking about the carnosine with it. So I just wanted to report that, I know a couple of cases where we talk about using Lifewave and other things for pain, but if the pain is actually a nerve itself that has been damaged, then the ice wave and the other things can be very irritating, whereas the carnosine can be very soothing and helpful. So for those.
So I'm going to put a carnosine patch on there then.
Yeah.
Because that's part of my healing process. It takes a long time for those nerves to recover. I mean, it's very numb on the lateral side of my patella.
Right.
I'll try that. Thank you. I didn't.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'll stop the recording.
Okay.